was bell hopping at the Roosevelt Hotel, where old Huey P. and the boys were living so well. One day I said, "Excuse me, Governor, why don't you tip?" And he just smiled at me and he said, "That's politics. That's politics.
That's politics.
That's politics.
That's politics.
That's politics.
That's politics.
Ain't gonna be no dirty tricks. You know you wanna get your ticket fixed. Oh, that's politics."
Where you at, y'all? I'm Bernie Cyrus, and you're watching That's Politics, the story about the good, the bad, and the funky of American politics. We have a great show for you today. We have Attorney General Liz Murrill. We have Frank Diperi back talking about the shakedown in Yorktown, New York. And we have Jeff Crouere and Roger Kennedy dealing with the funky wrap-up. I know you're going to enjoy it, so stick around, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. This is the good part of the good, bad, the funky. That's Politics, and we want to welcome the illustrious Attorney General of the state of Louisiana, Miss Liz Murrill. Hello, Liz.
Hey, it's great to be with you.
You know Jeff.
I do.
Well, I've been so supportive of the Attorney General, Bernie. She's done such a great job, and there's so many things to talk to you about, so let's just jump right into it. And I know you've been concerned, for reapportionment, that in the past we've been counting illegal aliens that are here. And I know we want to try to change that, right? What do we need to do?
So yeah, we have a lawsuit that's pending right now. We filed it just a few weeks ago to kind of force this issue of how we count people for purposes of reapportionment, not just for purposes of the census to see how many people are here, but also, what do we use those numbers for? What is it legal to use those numbers for? We know that we don't count every single person already for purposes of voting. Like some people can't vote, and we don't count certain people who are here, say they're studying, they're not supposed to be here already, that permanently, then we don't usually count them. And so we want to make sure that illegal aliens are not counted for purposes of
And a lot of this sometimes plays into gerrymandering these districts a lot, don't it? So you got to really have a very good, accurate count of the actual voters and so forth. Otherwise, it's a little more abstract and not efficient.
Well, it makes a big difference if California has 3 or 4 million more people who are not legally present in this country, but you're counting them for purposes of their representation in Congress.
Right.
So that's a pretty big deal. We stand to potentially lose a seat in Congress, and we could lose it because they're counting all of these people who cannot vote and should not be legally counted for purposes of reapportionment.
That's great.
And I think that is so important, and it looks like, I hope that you and the governor can turn things around so we have a big boom in population and we don't lose a seat, but I'm worried about that. So let's talk about something related, and that is the whole issue of birthright citizenship, because President Trump, is one of his executive orders, discussed that, and he's been now facing several lawsuits, but you're defending the president on that.
Well, I think that it depends on who you read and what you read to get, I think, a clear picture of what this legal issue is. But it all surrounds the interpretation of a few words in the 14th Amendment. And so under the jurisdiction of is the language that we're talking about.
Right.
And we really need the United States Supreme Court, I think, to address that issue. There are some very compelling arguments about what the intent was of the founders when they wrote the first 14th Amendment and when it was ratified. And I don't think that anybody believed that it was intended to kind of create this birthright citizenship tourism industry where people can want to come here in order to have a baby.
Which has been a major catalyst, if you will, for everybody to come,
Right.
Especially pregnant women, to come over here and have a baby. But the thing is, when you say jurisdiction, American citizens who are American citizens by birth or naturalization or whatever, that's a lot different than somebody who came over here illegally and drops a baby down, for lack of a better term.
That's right, and people go to an awful lot of time and trouble to become legal citizens legally present people in our country. There are a lot of people who have actually, become naturalized citizens, and they worked really hard to do that.
Yes.
And so what I'm opposing in both of these lawsuits are policies that are rewarding people who are breaking our laws.
And that's got to stop.
My family came here before we were a country. And so back in the day,
Mine too.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's different, and it's hard to accept the way things are, but you can't be as capricious to think that you can just morph it into something that is adaptable to this influx of trouble, because many good people, even some who came here illegally, are good people naturally.
Right, it's not about whether you're a bad person or
Right.
a good person. It's about whether you've followed the law and done what was legally required to come here and obtain asylum or citizenship or a green card if that's what you're applying for.
And around the world, Attorney General, a lot of countries have gotten away from this. So we're one of the few countries that have birthright citizenship.
Right.
And no country in the world has had it abused like this country has.
And that's what it is. It's
Yeah.
abuse.
Yeah.
That's the problem. And it's gone on for so long.
Right.
And unfortunately, a lot of people in Washington, D.C. have allowed it and protected them. What do you think about the mayors in the certain cities and state governors, like the governor of Colorado, he's on one side, and the mayor of Denver's on another side, about protecting the sanctuary cities and protecting criminals? Literally murderers, rapists, no, they're protecting these people.
Yeah.
They take an oath to protect their people, the citizens of America. That's just terrible. I know you're fighting a good fight.
Well, some people, they voted those people into office. They may embrace those policies. I can tell you that it is against the law in Louisiana. So sanctuary city policies do violate Louisiana law. Blake Miguez passed a law last year that prohibits those kinds of policies in the state of Louisiana. And so I have a legal right under that law to go in and challenge that policy and get an injunction and block it. Right now, there are very, very few of those policies in our state. There are a couple in place in New Orleans that I intend to raise some issues about.
Well, Jeff, I feel really good about our Attorney General.
Well,
she's on the right team
of
and doing the right
course.
thing.
And you mentioned Attorney General New Orleans, and let's talk about New Orleans for a second. So first thing is an issue where you're working with the mayor, and that is to get rid of this ridiculous consent decree that's been going on for so long. In my view, it seems like this judge doesn't want to let go of the power that she has. I think the NOPD is a much better group to be running the police department than a judge. How can we get rid of this consent decree?
It is a process. I mean, we're going to have to go back in front of the judge and get the judge to rule on a motion to end this. I would like to see that happen sooner rather than later. I think that we've been in it for too long. Everybody agrees that the New Orleans Police Department has made major strides and that there are no patterns and practices of unconstitutional behavior. The problem with these consent decrees is that you get a whole lot of cooks in the kitchen, and some of them don't want to let it go. Right. They just have an investment in the control or the policies. They don't want to see those things change. They like having a federal judge be their enforcer. There are some people who are making a ridiculously large amount of money off of it, including the court monitors. So we've paid them over $16 million in taxpayer funds.
Kind of like special investigators, huh?
Well, and so they don't want to stop making the money they're making off of this. At the end of the day, I think that the police department also we believe that they should be, they can handle their own business. They are supervised by the mayor and by the city council. So there is a political process in the ordinary course of business where there is accountability. My office even has some power to go in and address problems if there were problems. But at the end of the day, we need to have the people who are elected and responsible to us as the voters that be back in charge.
That's very true. And also, Jeff, I want to say that my family in the New Orleans Police Department for decades and decades that I've been talking to, they kind of like Miss Chief Kirkpatrick. They said she's moving in the right direction to get us off the consent decree, and I think, like you said, that would be a good thing.
She is, and she's worked in these kinds of situations before, and I think she is someone who, wants to show that New Orleans is going to police in a fair way, that she understands, as we all do, that people need to trust the police. They need to have trust and faith in the police department, but the police here have an enormous amount of support from the community.
Yes.
They are filled with really wonderful people who have committed their lives to public service and to protecting all of us. I think the chief is doing a good job of telling that story and telling it to the judge. I just think that we need to move to terminate this thing.
It's got to be. I mean, it's something that Mitch Landrieu and Barack Obama brought us, and that was in 2012. I mean, we're 13 years later.
We're still feeling the ramifications of those two guys.
And I know
And remember, it was all done by consent.
Right.
So there's never been a trial. There's never been a record. I mean, it was all done by agreement by a small group of people, and it has resulted in an enormous amount of resources that have been spent, and a transfer of power to a federal judge who shouldn't be the chief of police in New Orleans.
Amen.
Exactly.
Liz, in New Orleans, we say, when you meet somebody, say, where'd you go to high school?
Yeah, well,
Okay.
we say that in Lafayette too.
You just answered my next question. I was wondering the way you were born.
Yeah, Lafayette. Well, I was born in New Orleans.
Oh, okay.
Born in New Orleans, and my father is a retired doctor. He's 90 now.
God bless him.
He was he went to medical school on a Navy ROTC scholarship. So he went into the Navy to serve for a few years. Yeah, and then he moved to Lafayette and joined a practice with my dad. So I grew up in Lafayette.
Oh,
That's
terrific.
great.
Yeah.
Well, we're wrapping up, but in our last few seconds, do you know when the investigation into the New Year's Day attack will be done? I know you've launched one, right?
Well, yes, and so what I'm looking at are a lot of, kind of contributing things that might have played a role or contributed to the situation that we had, just that day. The actual investigation of the event is handled by the FBI.
Yeah.
The New Orleans Police Department kind of has its own piece of that in terms of the officers who were involved with the shooting of the individual at the end. My role is really looking at a lot of the events that led up to that. Contracting. Why weren't the bollards working? Why did we have those particular bollards to begin with?
Exactly.
And those kinds of questions that I think a lot of curious minds want to know. I'm going to be looking at all of those things.
And we know that if you do it, it'll be independent, it'll be fair.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people are looking forward to that.
Yeah.
And Jeff, we're going to invite you back real soon, we hope, because I'm really impressed with you.
Well, thank
now we
you.
know you're born in New Orleans. That means a lot.
Yeah, well, it's
And I
great being here.
played the Cajun band, so I like Lafayette a lot.
Welcome back, everyone. In the last few episodes of That's Politics, we've been following the story of Frank Diperi and the Yorktown Shakedown. We're very pleased to have back with us Frank Diperi to give us an update. Frank, how are you, sir? Welcome.
Okay, we're doing fine.
Just to remind everyone, there was a public-private partnership with Yorktown. It was terminated without compensation. There was a breach of contract lawsuit. A judge was disqualified because of ethical violations, because there were too many campaign contributions coming from the Yorktown attorney that exceeded the limit. The judge was then disqualified, and a new judge was appointed. Is that correct, Frank?
You're doing the work for me, Jeff. I love it. Keep going.
So after that happened, in the appeal process, they went back and started looking at some of the previous decisions that were made by the judge that had been disqualified, and some of those decisions were questionable, and thought we could talk about a few of those, Frank.
Well, the court clerk for it's in White Plains, the Superior Court, contacted Larry, and because of the campaign contributions, there was unethical, the spirit of ethics was violated. And that, so now the judge, because of our due process rights being violated, now took it to where it should have been vacated. Anything prior with the old judge should have been vacated. That's up in the air right now. And, we were thinking we were blessed that he was disqualified. It wasn't recused, and he should have recused himself, which he didn't. So right there, he might wind up with New York State I guess it may be even being.
Well, I mean, he could be investigated by the bar, and
Exactly.
theoretically, he could be impeached, right, Frank?
Very good. I love the way you take the words right out of my mouth, Jeff.
And of course, Frank, I mean, that's just the latest problem we've had, that this has been stretching back now for a few years. And if we could go back to the judge that was disqualified and the prejudicial decisions that were made and being uncovered, that just added to the problems that you've had with your group in getting justice here and getting fair play.
Well, you're exactly right, because it's one-sided. We're not able to speak up for ourselves. It contests any of the fact gathering that was biased, which judges are supposed to hear from both sides on a factual side of the table. This was us not being able to present any kind of our, this is what we did, this is what happened. And as we keep going, it gets better and better as far as what we're learning from all the questionable tactics that have been going on.
So, Frank, your group should have been paid in November of 2022. And the fact that you weren't, has triggered these lawsuits. And there could be additional penalties that are going to be owed on top of what you originally owed, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And from your mouth to God's ears, Jeff, I hope that's what happens, because Mr. Nussbaum's civil rights have been violated. He's been abused. And with that, we will pick up a daily at 9% throughout the whole year, on top of whatever monetary reward is actually given at the end.
What is the total, Frank, that you think that you should be compensated, the total amount? Do you know?
Well, my grandmother and grandfather always said, don't count the chickens before they hatch. In Italian, it's called the Maloikia. We're over 10 million.
10 million. Wow.
With the per annum, you're looking, it's moving towards the $20 million, but, I hate to even think I said that.
Are you still confident that you're going to be able to prevail against these bad actors and against this flat-out corruption, Frank?
Well, you know what? We learned even more last week, that we're astounded. And now we know who the players were. We know how it happened, who made it happen, who were the people, the conspirators from a private sector to the public sector, the muni players. So when you say bad actors, you nail it, because they were wide open. They don't care. As a matter of fact, now other cases for other industries with the town, because we're coming in, it seems to be a pattern. This is going to be something that
you're going to be opening up a big can of worms.
The Pandora's box.
Right.
Open, people starting to run. But you know what? It's funny, because we did we went to a campaign for a judge that we really like in the town of all. She's a town judge, and we seen the town clerk, and she didn't even know. She told me to get over it. The cart has left the barn. Yeah. And I said, hey, you don't know that the judge was dismissed? And she looked at me like, oh, you're kidding. I said, oh, yeah, there's a lot. So, you can see panic on her face.
Well, Frank, listen, thank you so much for your courage in pushing this forward and coming on our show and talking about it. We're going to stay on this, and we appreciate your time today.
Welcome back to one of my favorite parts of the show, where we discuss the good, the bad, and the funky, mostly the funky, and we'll try to solve some of the problems we have in our American government, and believe me, we have a lot. Welcome back, Roger Kennedy, and of course, Jeff Crouere. Good to see you guys.
Thanks, Bernie.
Let's start off with something we've talked about before, the lack of term limits in Congress. I mean, really, it's public service, not self-service, and some of them become millionaires while they're there. Something's got to be done.
Well, we just saw Mitch McConnell fall down for like the third time in the past 3 weeks. He's now in a wheelchair. We got Nancy Pelosi had her hip replaced. We had a woman that was found in a nursing home. She had been hanging out there 6 months because she couldn't vote because she was so old and feeble.
You talking about the Senator of California?
This was a woman from Texas, actually, a Republican.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, these people go there and they don't leave, Bernie. I mean, they're there for decades. And yeah, it's a real problem. They're not going to institute term limits on themselves. That's why you have the U.S. term limits and Convention of States trying to gather it from the state level and force it on Congress.
Yeah, you know, I believe in young blood. I think we should have a lot of young. You know, I ran for Congress in 19 whatever, and I was a Democratic nominee. Fortunately, I was smart enough to get out of that race. That being said, some of the young blood maybe not so good. Some of it might be jackal blood, and I'm not mentioning names, but I will say AOC. That being said, Raja, what is your opinion about that?
Well, it sounds like Jeff is talking more about age limit, in that some of these folks are getting to be at an advanced age where they can no longer function. But I think term limits would even apply to much younger much younger politicians, and the idea would be that they would not be getting so entrenched and getting all the money and just starting to build this big juggernaut that could not be defeated. But I think it might even be more than that, because even where there are term limits, you'll see a politician run for one office and with another politician in another office, and then they just flip once their term limits have
Well,
cut them
not
out.
going to be a perfect system, but let's start with term limits and try to get that solved. That's be a big part of it. Another thing we like to discuss often is the fact I mentioned about the money. Congressmen, our founding fathers did not get into it with anything but public service. They didn't get into be rich. Most of them, like Trump, were pretty well off, and they could devote their time for the public good. But now they go in, maybe they might go in with $1 million. I think some of them have like 80 and 90 by the time they get out. I mean, what is that? That's because they can bet the stocks, they got inside trading, and who knows what the lobbyists are doing. It's got to be changed.
Well, I mean, they're gaming the system. I mean, they're going in and getting fabulously wealthy. Exhibit A, again, is Nancy Pelosi. I mean, she is now worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Joe Biden is another great example. He's a guy who got big-time money from all his public service.
And he's used his family business.
Exactly.
Of course, they've been pardoned, so they're all innocent, presumed,
Right.
because they'll never be found out. How can you pre-pardon somebody for a crime supposedly they never committed yet, whatever? It's the most corrupt, he's the most corrupt president in modern day, no doubt about it. Roger?
I think it's bad enough that they gather all this wealth, but it's the quid pro quo aspect of the money. Where did they get this from? What did this land deal get the person who had passed through 3 people to get to the senator? You know, so no, I think it's even
Wheeling
deeper
and
than
dealing,
that.
as they say, huh?
Right. It's much deeper than just the money that's exchanged.
Yeah. Another thing we were talking about is foreign aid. We're not a rich country, but we spend like drunken sailors. I hate to use that, poor Navy guys, but that being said, I mean, we don't have the money, yet we're giving millions of dollars for transgender education in Africa. I mean, all these stupid things we have no business dealing with. I believe in foreign aid for shelter in disasters, food for the poor, and especially in our own country. There's a lot of poor people in poverty.
That's the problem, Bernie. We're giving all this money to foreign countries, and we got homeless veterans. We're giving money to all these foreign countries. We got poverty. We've got an open border. So we've got all these problems that we've been overlooking as we're giving billions away. And how can we do that when we have a $36.4 trillion national debt? I mean, I think that is totally irresponsible.
The other thing is, Jeff and Rogers, when you're a politician, if you leave office, within a certain period of time, you're limited to lobby, but you can come back and lobby. And a lot of our elected officials, former elected officials in Louisiana, are still living in Washington, D.C. And there's a reason for that. There's no money in the bayou for them. What do you think, Roger?
I think the whole idea of a politician then becoming a lobbyist, it makes you wonder what was in their mind before they got there. In other words, when they were in office, was there a deal that, hey, if you do this for me now, I've got a job for you when you get out?
Yep.
And You know, I think you want all these people to be independent in their thinking and to do what's right for their constituents rather than for whoever's buying their favor.
And this is a problem with both Republicans and Democrats.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Oh,
you know,
indeed, yes.
John Breaux doesn't leave. Bob Livingston doesn't leave. David Vitter doesn't leave. Mary Landry doesn't leave.
David Vitter's wife got a good job.
Yeah.
He left, but she got a federal judgeship.
So
I mean, there's a lot of wheeling and dealing going on, and
Yeah.
it's the way it's always been, but that doesn't mean it always has to be that way. Let's talk about Chuck Schumer. Now, Chuck Schumer just got a letter, and basically he told them, based on their, I think it was mostly the abortion vote, but nevertheless, whatever he said, you can't tell the Supreme Court you will pay for this later on. Yeah, he's got to go. I mean, really.
Well, it's not just the comments, it's the fact that subsequent to that, there were protests which turned to attempted assassination outside the personal residences of these justices.
George Soros, he's got his hands in everything. Now he's trying to take over WWL and 100, well, he already did, 100 radio stations plus. Not good.
It's a travesty. He's trying to, you know, corner the market in radio like he did with the DAs. You know, he bought all these DAs all over the country so he could implement his progressive policies. Now he's trying to take over the radio industry, 200 radio stations plus through Odyssey. And, you know, John Kennedy, Senator John Kennedy and others are raising questions.
The thing about Soros is he's manipulated everybody for so long, kind of like what Nathan Rothschild did after the Napoleonic War with England, when he knew that England was going to win, yet he hedged the stock market and just became a zillionaire after that, because they have access to so much because we're an open society. You can't do that in Russia or China. Believe me, I've been to China. They watch you everywhere you go.
And that's why their poll numbers are so terrible. I mean, the American people hate the Democrats right now. I mean, they've lost whatever good standing they might have had when Obama was president. It's gone.
And the Republican Party has become the party of the working class, which when I was young, my dad was a union electrician and Democrats, and I was a progressive Democrat in college, and we were the working class people and all fight. But now it's just the opposite.
As Reagan said, the Democrat Party, he didn't leave the Democrat Party, the Democrat Party left him.
Well,
Very,
I
very
think
true.
one problem that Democrats have now is they don't have any good ideas as far as what happens for the majority of the country, so they focus on these fringe ideas that only 10, maybe 20% of the country agree with them, and they try and railroad that through, and it cost them the last election.
It's bizarre. Don't get me started on the railroads. All right, this has been a great topic and great subject. It's great to have you guys back. We'll be back next time for more funky of the That's Politics show.